I take full responsibility. I don't speak your language, so I'll have 2 cups of regular coffee, please. I asked the young barista at the Starbucks next door for 2 cups of coffee. He was in his early 22nd like the others. I was in my early 22nd too, but it's been a while. He quickly poured me 2 cups of coffee. I paid for my order in cash, so I was expecting my change. But the kid messed up. He had to count the money twice, and I could see he was annoyed with me for not paying with a credit card like everyone else. I guess he thought I was obsolete. Well, sue me for being old-fashioned. I'm not going to change. I took those 2 cups of coffee along with my 57-year. I went to an empty table in the back of the coffee shop. I only had to wait a couple of minutes before she came in, looked around for me, and sat down next to me. I have to admit that I was a bit taken aback at how good she looked for her age. She was the same age as me. She looked about 10 years younger than before. She'd obviously been to the gym and lost about 5 lbs in the time I hadn't seen her. Her hair was still styled as always by her personal hairdresser and held the glamour of her gorgeous golden blonde hair. I didn't do my due courtesy and jumped up from my chair when she approached. She was still lucky I'd finally agreed to see her, 5 years after our divorce. Couldn't you have picked a normal place that made real coffee? I asked her instead of greeting her with a fair amount of disgust in my voice. Jesus, Tracy. Those kids couldn't make it good, even if Juan Valdez himself were here to show them how to do it right. She smiled nervously as she sat down in the chair across from me. I don't want to fight Ben, she began quietly, choosing her words carefully. I know I messed up. I kind of realized it then, and I definitely know it now. I took you for granted. I took your kindness for weakness. I made the U.S. turn into me because I was, what can I say, I was such a selfish fool. Tracy admitted in the evenings I sit alone in my apartment and watch something on TV. I can't even tell you what's on. I'm alone. I have no one to talk to. Ben, I miss our conversations. I miss just the sound of your voice. It doesn't even matter what you're talking about. I miss all the insignificant little things. I was always sure that me and you would be together until the end. Even when I did what I did, I still thought we'd be together for years and years to come. I didn't interrupt her, letting her express what had apparently been building up inside her. I listened for a long time, as I always do. I never thought for a minute that I'd be caught. I fell for an experienced seducer. She hesitated, and then hurried to correct herself. No, that's not quite true. Yes, he was a skilled seducer, but I didn't succumb to his charms. She hesitated. I guess I pursued him because I was naive and selfish. Tracy said all of this, studying her coffee cup uninterruptedly throughout her monologue. She never once looked up at me as she paused in the flow of words and brought the cup to her lips. I stared at her in silence, thinking about how many times in our 27 years of marriage I'd kissed those lips. I was suddenly aware that she was looking at me, waiting for an answer. You're the one who asked to meet, and you wanted to tell me your story. I told her I'd asked to see you many times since you filed for divorce. Why did you agree to it now? She asked, putting the cup back on the table. It took me a while to get to the point where I could talk to you without wanting to strangle you. I answered honestly. I loved you with all my soul, and maybe I still do a little. You betrayed my love, and for what? For cheap love? Well, you've had your fill of it. Besides, you threw away your love. You betrayed my trust. What did I do to deserve all this? I asked her the question that had plagued me for so long. Nothing. She answered quietly. It's not your fault. It happened because of me. It's on me. I wish I could pretend that by now I was done with this considerable stretch of my life and didn't need answers. Yes, I wish I could pretend I'd left it all behind, but that would be far from the truth. I know that hate isn't the opposite of love, but indifference is. I still had a lot of hate left, but I was getting there with indifference. So, tell me how it happened, and most importantly, why it happened. I pushed my coffee aside and carried on the conversation. It was a few years late. The reason is simple, she began with a sigh. I had just turned 50, and I was feeling a little old, and a little unwanted, you know? It enters your life so subtly, seemingly quite unnoticed. I noticed it in recent years when I've walked into a room and men's heads haven't turned in my direction as often as she used to, she added quickly. You've always told me and shown me that I'm the most beautiful to you, but it's just that sometimes we women want to be appreciated by other people. I think Edward saw that I needed him. After a short pause, Tracy continued. We'd been co-workers for years and we'd talked occasionally, but suddenly somehow he became my best friend. We started talking almost every day, and our conversations grew deeper and more personal. I'd worked with Edward for years and we'd talked occasionally, but suddenly he became my best friend. We started talking almost every day, and our conversations grew deeper and more personal. He was a good guy. I knew he was a player, but I thought I was in control. Well, I was wrong. You just picked up and threw her to him, I asked, feeling my stomach twist into a tight, cold knot. It didn't happen that fast. She replied that they'd had lunch together a few times, dinner once or twice, and that he'd often just had coffee. I knew what he was up to, but I still went with him. How long has this been going on, Tracy? I asked, my throat suddenly feeling very dry. About a year, she answered. I ended up in bed with him. It was exciting. He was new and different from you, and it felt wrong. I guess that's why I got over my guilt pretty quickly. Besides, since you didn't suspect anything, how could it hurt you? It's not like I ever gave you less, and I've never done anything to him that I wouldn't do to you. Tracy sighed again, she took a napkin from its holder and squeezed it in her fingers. Ben, I know it sounds corny, but it really was just a crush. We had fun, but love wasn't even in question. There never was. So you're saying that your fun in bed outweighed our marriage vows. It's just perfect. She grinned. Things were going pretty smoothly, and you wouldn't have known. If it hadn't been for that guy on the block, we'd still be married, and we'd both be much happier, she said, sounding annoyed. Why couldn't we just go back to when things were good between us? I was only able to catch it because my retired neighbor Ralph Gordon called me one day to report that my wife and some guy I didn't know had come into my house during the day. He thought it looked pretty strange. I jumped in my car, and 20 minutes later found Tracy and Edward making love in my marital bed. I interrupted them by slamming the back of his head with the back of my hand. I punched them both in the head with my fist, causing their heads to collide like billiard balls and giving them both concussions. I hovered over the shrinking couple for about 5 more minutes before I gave the one last hearty kick and slammed the door. I'm sorry, but I can't erase the damage. I told the woman, who wasn't the brightest, that I'd made a mistake. I know you've made mistakes in your life too. Did you have to go overboard? We could have gotten through it, the two of us, Tracy said in a pleading voice. I don't think so. I've been out of the loop for a while. I get that you had an affair, but that was 5 years ago. 5 years, Ben. You're single now, I'm alone. Our kids are mad at both of us. Why not try again? We've had 27 good years together. Tracy kept trying to convince me. I wonder what she was counting on. I corrected her. We had 26 good years together. I can't say about the last year that it's been good for me. You know that what you did was a betrayal. I don't know if I found out about it or not, but I added, what happened to your lover after I left? Tracy raised the cup to her lips again and took another sip of coffee. She could see that I was staring at her intently, but she still couldn't help but flinch for a second. A few months later, he left her for someone else who was younger and prettier. I told you it was just an infatuation, not love. She said it as if she didn't want to. Pushing the words out of her mouth, she said, yes, just a fun evening with someone else's wife. I replied laconically, and she looked away, staring at the ceiling fan. Did I deserve such disrespect from you? She whispered. No, you didn't, she said. I got up and brought each of us a second cup of over-roasted bitter coffee. The disgusting flavor of this drink seemed to match the mood of our conversation. Over the past 5 years, Tracy and I had been fairly reliable at portraying mutual affability the few times we'd met at family events. However, I'd never been alone with her or engaged in conversation. I know she tried hard to get me to talk to her, but I managed to avoid any potentially dangerous situations. I still wasn't sure I wouldn't snap her neck if we were alone, or just break down in tears at times. I felt the urge to vent my emotions in one way or another almost every minute of the day. Surprisingly, the only place I did miss Tracy was the bedroom. In all my 27 years of marriage, I'd never once looked lustfully at other women. I had no idea about the modern nighttime habits of the American male over 50. I soberly assessed my credentials and figured that for someone like me, the likely choices in the female fish pond would be quite small. What do you think? I was surprised and a little taken aback when single women started appearing around me from everywhere, sometimes seemingly out of thin air. Many of them were not at all shy about what they wanted from me. I had no idea that there were more single women over 50 than single men, and that many single men over 50 seemed to prefer younger women. This meant that there were fewer available male partners of the same age for single women over 50. On top of that, there was the decency and sociability factor. There are other factors at play, too. The odds are stacked in favor of men over 50 who aren't afraid to meet and chat with women they don't know. This has never been an issue for me. So over the past 5 years, I've had as much variety of female company as I've wanted. Who would have thought it? I also had a choice about what kind of contact I wanted. I was open to kind of contact with ladies, whether short-term or long-term. Not every woman was looking for her next husband. Some of my newly acquainted girlfriends, as indeed some men, were only interested in adding variety to their lives. For me, it was not my goal to necessarily find the next Mrs. Ben Arniston, but at the same time, I wouldn't mind if a lady worthy of it magically appeared in front of me. The one thing that was absolutely out of the question was the return of Tracy Arniston to my life. How does that saying go? Been there, done that, ripped my heart out of my chest and adorned my t-shirt. You've got the trophy, so why are you on your own, Tracy? I asked, a little surprised. You still look great, so finding a man shouldn't be a problem for you. And you're obviously not shy about meeting men, she gasped, and for the first time, I felt a little ashamed that I had insulted her. Actually, I didn't mean it that way, you know it, I corrected myself. Tracy snorted resentfully, but then, I had to admit that I was right. Maybe I don't want to date another man. Maybe I've come to the conclusion that I've already met the right man. I lost him, but now I want him back. I know what I did to you was wrong. It was terribly wrong. But I also know you're a good man who believes in forgiveness. I know you believe that because I know you better than anyone. I had to control myself not to raise my voice in the cafeteria. You're a smart woman, Tracy. Don't you ever think about what would happen if you got caught? I growled through my teeth. No, I never thought I'd be caught. She replied, we shouldn't have brought it into our house. I admit it was a mistake, but it was the only time we ever did it there. Edward had been encouraging me to do it in our bed for weeks. It was your bed. I knew what he wanted. Yeah, I just finally gave in to his persuasion. Now I think what Ralph was. Really, he was just being a good friend when he told you about me. I know a lot of people just wouldn't have gotten involved. Tracy paused for a little while, waiting for my reaction, but never waiting for a response. She sighed again and continued her confession. In the cold light of day, the words "I'm sorry" don't even come close to what I'm feeling. God, I've been so stupid and arrogant in so many ways, but for all that, Ben, I want you back. I need you. Please, Ben. I'll beg for it if I have to. Her voice was close to a sob, and there was a note of desperation in it. I shook my head negatively, feeling sorry for her but also thinking she was being a bit dramatic. Tracy was looking at me, waiting for my answer. I didn't sound like I was happy about it, but I wasn't trying to be triumphant or get revenge either. I was just saying what I thought was obvious. Please, Tracy, don't embarrass us both. How about you put my feelings ahead of your own for now? That's what you should have done 5 years ago. Actions have consequences. But you've forgotten that, I quipped. Tracy sniffled. She was on the verge of tears. You're right again, she said, and the spark of hope in her eyes faded. I won't bother you anymore. There was a time when that wistful look would have prompted me to stand up and take her into a heartfelt embrace. I actually felt a pang of pain for both of us, as I watched her stand up and walk out of the coffee shop without waiting for a reaction from me. I watched Tracy's silhouette walk away, and then watched the door close behind her for another long moment until a woman in her 50-seconds came to my table and put a cup of latte with salted caramel in front of me. She said, I know you hate our coffee, so I want you to leave on a delicious note. She had a bright smile on her face. Didn't you just tell her? I clarified. I didn't want to completely tear her soul apart. There was a time when I longed to destroy her, but someone convinced me that I was better than that. I still have those feelings, though. I have to say, I'm not sure that's entirely true, I replied with a smile as she rounded the table. The woman was sitting on my lap, wrapped one arm around my neck and kissed me softly. I glanced at the wedding ring on her left hand. In 2 months, Sandy Caruso and I would be married. I'm sure of it. Unlike the last Mrs. Ben Armitage, this good man will always come first in my life, she said with conviction. I know what it's like to lose the person closest to you. I watched one of them fade away in the hospital from cancer 10 years ago. That's why I will always put my man first. She gave me another endlessly loving kiss. I noticed a few of the cafe employees walking around the lounge in the background, smirking as they saw me kissing their boss. The employees had never met me before because, like I said, I don't drink Starbucks coffee even though I have a crush on the franchise owner. I'd never really thought about karma until I met Sandy on a bike ride about 2 years ago. I hadn't ridden a bike since I was a kid, but after my divorce I had a lot of free time on my hands. I went to the gym regularly to keep in shape, but I didn't really enjoy the cardio workouts there when I was still with Tracy. I once suggested we buy bicycles and start riding together, but she wasn't interested. Once I was single, it was a cleansing shake-up to my post-marital life. I decided to get a nice road bike and hit the road. I mostly rode alone, but occasionally joined organized group rides with other health enthusiasts. I wasn't very good at finding John Henry signs, and during one such ride, I lost my way while I was looking around, trying to figure out which way to pedal. A woman pulled up beside me and asked if I was on the ride. I replied that I was, and she laughed. Then she told me I needed to turn around and go back with her because I had missed the turn. The trim stranger said, "Turn around and ride back with me, because you missed the right turn about half a mile back." I did as she instructed, and when I turned my bike around, she was right in front of me. I watched with excitement as a very attractive buttocks, tightly encased in stretchy spandex shorts, danced in front of my eyes, while her mistress pedaled vigorously, standing up from time to time in the saddle. "Hey, genius! Stop staring at my buttocks and catch up with me so we can talk like adults." While we were riding, she said to me with a very understanding smile. For the next 36 miles, we rode side by side at a relaxed pace and told each other stories about our lives. I told her about my unfaithful wife, and she told me about her late husband, who died of cancer. We both talked about our grown children. We each had 2, and our grandchildren. Sandy had 3 already, and I had only 1 so far. The total distance of our ride that day was 52 miles, which was the longest distance I had ever ridden before. It was 35 miles, but with a beautiful and interesting partner, all those miles flew by. We had a date the next night. Despite the fact that my leg muscles were incredibly sore and I was moving through space with some difficulty. 2 weeks later, our relationship became exclusive, and on our 4th date, we shared a bed. My days as an elderly single man were over, and a whole new life full of new colors and experiences was ahead of me, with the love of a wonderful lady who made my heart beat again.